we're going to look at bigger chaos coming. Jesus wants believers to be forewarned and mentally prepared for huge chaos events ahead, as if we don't already have enough huge chaos events already, right? But it's going to get bigger, it's going to get worse. The coronavirus pandemic caused economic chaos. Some on radio and TV were sure that it was the Great American Depression had already begun. And they were selling things like gold coins and stuff. So, but it's like, a long time ago I heard that America was, let's see, I've forgotten the number now, but it was multiple trillions of dollars in debt. Yeah. And I said, why is nobody upset with that? And now we pass $3 trillion bills left, right, and center. Right? It's like, who cares about how much money we're in debt, right? So anyhow. So then came the chaos of riots and burning city buildings, right? It's like, oh boy, where are we going next? Jesus wants his folk to be aware of more chaos coming. Jesus has a chaos playbook of how he will allow nations to crush each other until the final 3.5 years, called the Great Tribulation. Jesus had Daniel say this in Daniel 12:1, at that time there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. Now Jesus repeated this later in his end time chaos prediction in Matthew 24:21. Said, then there will be a great tribulation such as not since the beginning of the world until this time, nor ever shall be. So both of those combined, that language says the worst is yet to come, right? Jesus is saying that unless he intervenes, right, in Matthew 24:22 there, unless those days are shortened, no flesh would be saved alive, i.e. nobody left alive on planet Earth. So he's coming to stop the end of humanity on Earth, because he's got a plan for 1,000 years of happy, peace, abundant living under Jesus Christ, President of the world. So far World War II has been the worst time of trouble ever in human history, where 50 million people died. Now, America experienced it, but nothing like England, nothing like Europe, nothing like the Jews. And it was a very bad time. And I was smart enough. I was a fetus during World War II, and I was smart enough to hold on long enough. And I got born in November, and the war finished in June. So I was, it's like, is it safe to come out now? Jesus tells us it'll get much worse than World War II. A short description of the Jesus playbook is shown to us in Daniel chapter 11. Just 7 verses. And you would think that these 7 verses would be on radio and TV from the preachers left, right, and center, but it's like it almost never gets mentioned. I'm not sure why. These 7 verses reveal the giant chaos events between now and the start of the Great Tribulation. Most people, just in their minds, they focus on the book of Revelation, which is primarily about the tribulation, and they draw images in their mind from Revelation, and God already gave us the prelude, the lead up to Revelation in Daniel 7, Daniel 11. So these 7 verses are in Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 through 45, and chapter 12, verse 1. And they shouldn't have made a chapter break there. If you examine it yourself, you'll see that verse 45 in chapter 11 finishes, and the very next words say, at that time. So you can't start a new chapter with at that time, since it refers to the verse before it. Almost no one explains these verses with our future days ahead of us in mind. Therefore, almost nobody understands that the chaos events have already begun, right? And I love it when I hear preachers on TV say, it's amazing how you can't find America in Bible prophecy. It's like, yeah, because you're not looking in the right places, right? Daniel 11:40 says, at the time of the end. Okay, so there it is. Daniel knew, he wrote it, Jesus gave it to him. Jesus and his disciples knew that the end of the age of man and Christ's return would happen together. Matthew 24:3, the disciples came to him saying, what will be a sign of your coming and the end of the age of man, the age of men trying to rule and govern themselves on planet Earth. So now we go back to Daniel 11:40. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind. Now, a lot of people are confused as to what do you mean king of the north and king of the south. A study of history shows that the king of the south came out of the out of Greece, out of Alexander the Great, who conquered a great huge swath in the Middle East. Then he died, and then his 4 generals were given pieces of the empire, and the 2 great pieces were the king of the north and the king of the south. The king of the south was based in Egypt and across below Israel, and the king of the north was based in Greece, Europe, and that was across the northern part of Israel. So Israel was like the meat in the sandwich, and the king of the north and the king of the south, they fought against each other a lot. They weren't satisfied with their own territory, so they'd come across Israel and go south and fight down there, and they'd go north and they'd fight up there. And so it became known throughout history as the king of the north, the northern empire, and the southern empire. So the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, and with many ships. Now, this is verse 41. Remember, verse 40 said, at the time of the end. So, at the time of the end, this verse says, many ships, and he shall enter the countries, plural, overwhelm them, and pass on or pass through. Right? So, this is an event that's going to happen at the time of the end. All right, so we ask ourselves, which end time nation uses many ships to go to war, or has used many ships to invade 2 Middle Eastern nations? It's already happened, right? Most people don't see it, most people don't recognize it, but here's the evidence we've got so far from Daniel. In the last days before Christ returns. So we're getting close to the beginning of the tribulation. We're getting close to the return of Jesus Christ in a, 7 to 10 year period maybe. B, a European origin nation, right, uses many ships to overwhelm at least 2 Arab nations. This already happened, right? C, this mighty power nation passes through or passes on or withdraws. And if you watch the news from time to time, just in the last couple of weeks, there's talk of withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, withdrawing troops from Iraq, and even withdrawing troops from Germany. We currently have a president who doesn't want to station American troops all over the planet. He wants to bring them home. And just like with ISIS, if there's a flare-up somewhere, he just sends the planes over with bombs. And it says, where's the ISIS? They're over here. Bomb that. And pretty soon, the ISIS people had no caliphate. They're still out there. They just don't have a caliphate. So no, America is in the process of withdrawing from 2 Middle Eastern nations. And this only began, pretty much, in 2016 with a new president who said, we don't need to station troops. We're not the policemen of the world. We don't need to have troops all over the place. So the withdrawing is still taking place. So virtually, verse 40 is like a 20-year-long verse. But God has done that in other verses throughout the Bible. This Daniel 11:40 description is a perfect fit for 9/11 and the wars with Afghanistan and Iraq. And so we're in the time of the end, right? Based on that understanding. Verse 40 is still happening, the withdrawal from the Middle East. The next major chaos activity in the Jesus playbook is listed in Daniel 11:41. This will be a World War III sized conflict. If you read it slow enough, you can see it. Verse 41, he shall enter the glorious land, that's Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown. So picture the Middle East. Little old Israel is right in the middle and surrounded by Arab nations that hate Israel's guts and want to destroy it and have tried to destroy it many times and failed so far, right? And so Israel gets entered, in my mind, to be protected, like we entered Kuwait to protect it from Saddam Hussein. And then the many countries in the Middle East are overthrown because they started a war with Israel and America. Right? Verse 43, he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver and the precious things of Egypt, also the Libyans and the Ethiopians. So Jesus has had Daniel name 3 specific nations in the Middle East that are still there now today, right, as 3 of the many nations that are going to be overthrown. And he points out that unlike the attack into Iraq and Afghanistan, which were nation building, once we achieved what we wanted to achieve, we then went to nation building, and we spent, I hear $6 trillion, I hear $8 trillion trying to rebuild these 2 countries in the Middle East, and what have we got? Zero, nothing. We made no progress. So next, after World War III in the Middle East, will come the dreaded Great Tribulation as indicated in Daniel 12, verse 1. And if you simplify down Daniel 12:1, it says, at that time, which means whatever just happened in verse 45 of chapter 11, at that time, i.e. after World War III, there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation even to that time. So we're back to the worst time in human history, which means now the tribulation is about to begin. Almost nobody explains where World War III will take place. A lot of people will tell you Russia attacks the Middle East. A lot of people, come up with other scenarios, but God has said, and it's obvious. Ask a computer, just run a computer program and say, which countries in the world are highly likely to be attacked like tomorrow morning? Israel, right? They get attacked, it's like almost on a monthly basis. It's been quiet lately, I think, although you don't, when we have a lot of news in this country, we don't get much news from other countries, right? So it's like they're all on pause, right? You all just wait until we get done with our news, right? So Daniel 11:41 shows Israel on the one side of the war and many Middle Eastern nations, including Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopia, on the other side. Jesus wants believers to know that these events are, and be fully prepared. Now, we can get fearful, and that's a natural response. But he wants us fully prepared. He wants us to know, and he wants us to be courageous, and he wants us to be excited, really, that the kingdom is getting very close. If I could prove to you that the king would come tomorrow morning, would you be happy? Boy, I would be happy. It's like, Gary would be happy. It's like, forget going to the doctor, right? Right? So Jesus wants believers to know these events, be fully prepared when they do begin, and to be able to explain to other people what's going on. Our daily preparation should be like it says in James 4:8. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. In modern English, text your friend a lot, and your friend will text you back a lot, right? Only God is running the universe. If you're drawing near to God, he's going to be helping you more and more and drawing near to you, and it's going to be a real good situation. But it finishes the verse, cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. And boy, does that apply to the Christian nation of the United States of America, which, God has to sort of wink or scratch his head every time he hears somebody on TV say, America, the great Christian nation. It's like, we want to be a great Christian nation, but we're not doing so well. Planned Parenthood is a classic example right there. James 4:9, lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. If we are daily drawing nearer to Jesus and the Father, we will be prepared for the great chaos events